actually.
Depends on who's recording, I guess. But I think everyone's going to be a little different.
Okay. Anyway.
So we're good?
Let me find out.
Let me know when is a good go so I can get started.
Oh shit. Okay, I think we're live.
All right. All right, we are live. First time. So all right. Welcome to the 15th episode, a meeting of Junto Club on March 18th, 2021, where we are inspired by the original Junto Club started by Benjamin Franklin around 300 years ago, and where he started to discuss topics of politics, philosophy, science, and business. And today, our main topic is going to be the future of computing, more specifically, the future of computer chips. And then we have, which basically runs everything in our lives right now. And then today we have a guest, C, and he had been working on GPU for many years, and then including many other things, including painting. So anyway, so we before we get there, as per usual, we're gonna start with a quote from Benjamin Franklin, right? And today, the quote that confused me a little bit is, quote, it's easier to build 2 chimneys than maintain one in field, unquote. What does that mean?
Can you repeat it for a second? Okay.
Oh.
It's easier to build 2 chimneys, right, than maintain one in field, like the field and energy.
Okay, yeah.
I think this one's easy. Last week's was really tricky. I still don't know, but this one, I think he's just saying. I mean, the practical analogy is, if you have 2 chimneys, you can kind of stop using one while you clean it and maintain it while you use the other.
Okay.
And I think the larger metaphor here is sort of an element of like sometimes doing the work up front to be more prepared will pay off in the end. Like you try to take a shortcut and then you end up having to do more work down the road because you took the shortcut to start with. There's lots of examples of that in life. This is a old school version of that. Personally, I know I've tried to like be lazy with cooking where I don't like properly prep everything and use like as many dishes because I'm like, oh, I can just do this on the fly or something, and then it makes a mess and like I screw things up and I'm like, I should have just like cut everything up and separated it all out before I started cooking. That's where it comes to me. But yeah, that's my angle.
What's the second part mean though? Let's maintain one in field. What does that mean? And that's the part I don't get.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about this as more like there's certain, I don't know. I mean, I guess keeping something like one thing functioning well is maybe more work than sort of having 2 things that don't work at all. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that was my first idea, was that like it's easy to build something. It's harder to maintain it and keep it running for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like in software, it's like it's easy to code up something than to like maintain it over the lifetime of like, passing down generational knowledge and keeping something working continuously.
So you're saying it's not necessarily about being able to like switch chimneys, just in general, building something's easier than keeping it going long term.
Right. You can like take a bunch of shortcuts just to build it, but to maintain it, there's potential of hard work or unglamorous work.
Okay. So the second part basically means keep one going, right? So it's easier to build 2 chimneys, but it's hard than to keep one going for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I assume maintain in field means like maintain it while it's being used, right?
Okay.
Probably.
Probably, I don't know.
It's a little bit of an old school saying. I don't think any of us have a 100% certainty what it means, but
yeah,
I haven't maintained a chimney before.
Yeah. To be fair, 300 years ago, so
yeah.
All right, that's good. I think that's good help me understand Benjamin Franklin a little bit more. So any news topic you guys want to talk about this week?
They might be doing something with the filibuster. They keep going back and forth on that. Have y'all seen any of the debates about, whether they're going to change it, remove it, or whatnot?
Oh, are they?
I don't think there's unanimous Democratic support for that.
Yeah. I think that's the problem because what is it, Joe Manchin or whoever doesn't seem to want it. I really like the idea of just making the minority of who are doing the filibuster have to be there, so they can still do it. They just can't filibuster by like sending an email and then going out to like a bar. Like they have to actually like sit in. I think that would be a fair compromise where it's like doesn't remove it but makes it costly, so you can't abuse it as much. But I don't know what y'all are.
I thought filibuster was you have to like stand there and keep talking.
Right.
That's part of it, but right now, like I guess the change they would do is like you would need the 41 people to filibuster, because if you have 60 who want to vote against it, they can just override it anyway. So I'd say the 41 people have to be there. So you can't have one person stand up and the rest go home and then take like hour shifts or something. I don't know all the details about how it works. But right now you don't need the 41 to be there. And I think that would be a fair compromise.
Democrats are the one that want to get rid of it, right?
Mostly, yeah.
And why do they want to do that? What's the motivation?
The majority.
That because they have the majority now, very, very slightly. And I mean, for the last, like, I don't know, 12 plus years, Republicans have used it heavily to obstruct like everything all the time. So I feel like a lot of people are just like, why? It's just been abused too much. They don't think it fulfills the same purpose it used to be.
But I thought, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But I thought Republicans were having the majority for a long time, right? So why didn't they try to remove it? They find it useful, I guess.
I mean, what I hear is a lot of people say what Republicans most want to do is not much in the first place, besides maybe like, a lot of their platform is cut taxes, which you can do with budget reconciliation, which bypasses the filibuster anyway. So it's kind of like, I mean, I saw people talking about this. They're like, why haven't the Democrats used the filibuster against Republicans? They're like, what meaningful legislation have Republicans passed as law through the Senate in like the last 10 years? Like, I can't really think of any. I don't think there's much.
So do you think we should remove it then?
So removing it seems extreme at first, but to be fair, like most state legislators don't have filibusters, and there's like other examples in government where we don't use it and it's fine. But I think compromises like needing everyone to be there that make it much harder is a decent first step. And from there we can see. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's probably that's as far as I would go, honestly. Like getting rid of it entirely, I could see not necessarily being good. But I mean, I can see if it's something you want, 41 people is willing to fight on, to the point they're willing to just be there for extended hours, then let them fight. I mean, I think that's probably means it's something that should be examined at least closer versus if you just get rid of it, it's sort of we can just have our party lines depending on who is the majority at the time. So.
Okay. Sounds good. And I guess personally for me, the topics, the news topic, I guess, I mean, we are in Atlanta, right? I mean,
yes.
All of us have lived in Atlanta, either have lived or, are living in Atlanta right now. And then I guess based on what happened on Wednesday, and just a couple of days ago, I guess I have to, I'm not sure because, yeah, the Atlanta shooting, right? And a couple of days ago. And I was debating whether I should talk about it, because, I'm Asian, obviously. And then, yeah, it's just a hard topic. So I was debating, but I think I think it's a good place, good to talk about it, I guess. Yeah. So, and in the morning, I guess yesterday morning, when I first heard the news, I was like, oh man, do I need to stop going to like Asian businesses in case someone come in and just calm down everybody and then and then after I hear like the news he was not motivated by racial bias or racism. I mean, strangely, that made me feel a little bit like better. Like it's not because it's not racial bias based on racism. I mean, it's not inspired by racial bias. That's what he claimed to say, right? So I don't know what I'm saying, but yeah. So that's, I guess I'm saying that fear is there, right? It's just like, but I don't want to live my life by fear, right? Just like not do anything because I'm afraid of something. Because I mean, shooting happened to other populations as well. Like why? I mean, like a few years ago, there's different other people that come down, like another different group of people, right? So yeah. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I guess almost every population is a target, right? In a way. So yeah. Anyway.
I hadn't read much about it. So he said he gave his motivations? Is that what you're saying? Like he explained why he did it? Or is
I think there were a lot of references to like God and religion and like specific, like, so it wasn't just Asian businesses he targeted, right? It was specifically spas. So, and I think that like those were like sexual places.
So sex workers were the target.
Yeah.
Hey, no, I don't. Why you say? I don't think those spas are sex workers though. So.
Well, I mean, of course it's not legal, but I mean those types of places have certain connotations. I won't say those. Of course.
I did see something where people like supposedly confirmed that multiple of the places were like on online websites where you can like look up for where you can get happy endings and stuff. This is all hearsay. I didn't double check, but that's what I saw. People are like, oh yeah, if you go online, you can find these places. They do this.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Any thoughts on that, C? Before we go to
I haven't heard too much about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Other than like the chief saying that the guy had a bad day or something.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
My fiance just told me about that, and I'm like, oof, that's not what you want to say.
Right. That's a bad quote.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I do like how you finished your thoughts, Shu, just by saying like, I feel like we live in a world where basically like every single piece of news is basically like inspiring some type of fear, right? Like, I mean, the virus, like, yeah, it's important to be smart. It's important to wear masks. It's important to get vaccinated, whatever. But it's like, basically like for over a year at this point, like we've been hearing day in and day out, like this virus is outside that's going to kill you. And like before that, like, I mean, I feel like in all honesty, this mass shooting is sort of like America getting back to where it was, right? I mean, like it used to be like every week before before the virus, like it was a mass shooting of one thing or another. So it's like, I mean, the world is a scary and terrible place, but I think it's important to like focus on not being afraid and living your life.
That's really dark, Mike. That's really dark.
When Mike looks back into his life years later, he's gonna be like, the turning point for COVID was when we cared about mass shootings again. Then I knew we were almost done.
Back to normal.
So yeah, one thing I think this is very sensitive is because he's targeting like Asians, right? So that's why, and then attacking on Asians have been going on for a while now, and then that's why there's a lot of protests going on like within the Asian community, right? So so a lot of media is like, oh, is this a trend? Is like is Asians are being really targeted? We do see a lot of video of where like, old people walking on the street, just get attacked, right, pushed away by some random person, right?
Yeah, so, that was like in Oakland.
Huh?
I saw one in Oakland.
Okay, yeah. So do you think that's a trend? No.
Wouldn't stun me if like there's increased like racism or vitriol toward Asian Americans because of the virus, but yeah, but I mean America is racist, so I mean it's so I mean I don't know what you can like, I mean other than just being like when like you see something, just feel like don't be stupid, or if it's like something like this, the news is saying like don't be stupid. I don't know what. Like, I mean, there's just so many stupid people.
Yeah. I mean, I guess. I mean, I think I talked about this before, and I've been struggling with like racism. It's not about like I try not to think about it. I basically my strategy just to ignore it, right? Like just even if there's a trend, I just ignore it because otherwise I I don't want to live in fear, right? And then plus 99.9% of the people I gonna meet or ever meet are gonna be good people, right? It's not gonna be, so yeah. So hate, and I try to adopt, I guess, the wise word from Taylor Swift. Someone she says, haters gonna hate,
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, that's how I'm gonna try to deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only speak for myself, right? I mean, a lot other people might have harder time, right? So for me personally, because otherwise it's like because it give you a negative. I guess I try not to get into the victim mindset as well because I'm very insecure person already. I don't want to get even more insecure about myself, right? So anyway, so yeah.
No. Yeah. I mean, I think when you see something that's obviously wrong, you should try to right it. Or like, I mean, if it's like there's an instance where you suffer some type of discrimination, like make it known and like try to fight against it. But I think it is good that like you shouldn't like go into every situation like anticipating like something negative to happen. So.
Yeah. And that's why I try to not to do basically, right? Yeah.
No, it's something I think that's valuable is living in the moment and being more reactive people, because I think it's healthy, like mentally healthy compared to like constantly like pushing up, like battling against something or like battling against what you see the future holding.
Sounds good. All right, that's good. Let's move on to the last emotional topic. future of computing. So, all right. So I guess my first question, the motivation for this is, I want to know, like, in the future, if I need to invest all my money into an area of computing, right? Where will I put all my money? Where will I put all my chips? In microchips. That's my. So that is the main motivation. So see, that's the first question. Where do you think? Where should I put all my? If you're gonna put all your net worth in one area of computing, where would you put all your money?
Well, I wouldn't put all my net worth into one area of computing.
But if you are
gun to your head.
Yeah.
I think computing is like the different areas are kind of cyclical. Like one area is going to see some radical improvement and then they'll plateau off, and then another area will see some improvement. And it's really based on just the underlying technology, what new invention is going to enable. So for example, for a long time we have just Moore's law going on, and I think you're going to ask this question later on, so I won't belabor the point, but basically for a long time we could just like increase the clock speed, right? And no one really cared too much about it. Every year or two your performance would double, and you just wait a while and then things would get better. But now that we've hit various kinds of walls on that, we're looking for different solutions at different levels in hardware and software to enable new experiences and new performance. So it's kind of like mainstream of me to say this, but I think AI, there's a lot of potential where that's going. But if you look at the history of AI, there's been like several springs and winters, they call it, where like some new technique will be they demonstrate like you can do a lot with this new technique, and then they're like, oh,
Deep
this is
learning.
the future is coming, the general artificial intelligence is coming. And then they realize, oh, you can only do so much with this technique, and then they're like, oh, AI is dead, it's never going to happen. And then you kind of like rinse and repeat this a few times. So currently now it's this like deep learning neuron based kind of neural networks, and you can certainly do a lot with it. And I don't know just exactly like what the ceiling for that is, but maybe it's enough to take us all the way to AGI. Maybe it's going to stop, and all I can do is tell you whether something's a hot dog or not.
So your point is the microchips development usually are generated by push by the applications, right? Is that your point? Like it was driven by the development, generally driven by an applications, like, right?
I think it's a mutual relationship. You have like hard video accelerators, back in the day they're called, and then they develop more and more capabilities, and they're accelerating graphics. And then at some point, someone realized, hey, this is a really powerful computer, and we can use it for something beyond graphics. And then at a certain point, they're like, oh, we can use this for matrix multiply and convolutional neural networks. And then you have this AI explosion because GPUs are, so many times more powerful than CPUs.
So going back a little bit, like I think there are three major types of, and it's from what I can see, types of computer chips, right? One is a CPU, GPU, and the other one, I mean, CPU is what everybody have on their laptops, right? And GPU, of course, is like gaming computers on the one that in data centers, and then also on the one using like for mining Bitcoins, right? GPUs. And the other ones are ARM processor, I think. They are using for like, phones, right? So is that correct or no?
So if you want to look into classification of like computer chips, you have CPUs, and the major players are the x86 architecture, which Intel and AMD makes, and ARM, which everyone else basically makes. And ARM is on the low power end, and x86 is on the high power end. And it's not like these things are inherently high power, low power. It's just where they started from. So,
what do you mean by high power, low power? Do you mean the speed?
Yeah, their speed, right? Like you look at x86 CPUs, they're running at like close to 5 gigahertz now. And ARM processors have traditionally been very slow, but they're slowly ramping up to something like 3 gigahertz. So it's not like very, very slow, but it's still two very different approaches. Basically, x86 is like, we'll throw more area and more power at this thing, and we just need it to run at a higher frequency. Versus ARM is more of a, how much more can we accomplish without increasing frequency? Okay. So that's CPUs. Another one is GPUs, and that's mainly for applications where you have massive parallelism. CPUs, you're running, 4, 8, 16 cores maybe. Newer generations, you have more and more cores, but GPUs, you have thousands of cores, or 10,000 cores now, I think.
10,000 cores?
Yeah. So it's, order of magnitude difference, or 2 orders of magnitude difference. And the way you can get away with that is because a GPU works on mainly pixels. A 1080p screen, you have 2 million pixels. A 4K screen, you have 8 million pixels. 60 frames, 120 frames a second, that's billions of pixels that you're working on every second. So you can, and the algorithms are generally such that you can treat each pixel relatively independently. So you just run them on their own core. And the more cores you add, the more compute you can do, because there's basically a limitless amount of work to do. But you can't necessarily do that with CPUs.
So what, I guess going back a little bit, like what do you know what Xbox using? Like, I mean, no, it's gaming like consoles, like the PlayStation and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're using x86. AMD makes both the CPU and GPU for the current and last generation consoles.
x86?
Yeah.
Oh, and that's an architecture, right? You're talking about?
Yeah. So that's the processor, the CPUs that AMD makes.
Okay. And do you know why? Because I talked to one person the other day randomly, and then he was just like, oh, he tried to buy a PlayStation 5 right now, and just like can't buy it anywhere.
Right.
Do you know what happened there? Like, why there's a shortage?
I think part of it is the pandemic. A lot of people are just buying more computers in general, and phones. And the other part is that there's only so much production capacity for these chips, and everyone wants to use the latest generation. I don't know how long it's been, but basically they're all trying to build from TSMC, that's the Taiwan silicon manufacturer company.
Oh yeah.
And so they only have so many supplies to go around. If you look at NVIDIA, they had to go with Samsung, and like AMD's chips, basically they're all manufactured at 7nm process, and they can't go higher because that would be worse off, more power, more area, and they can't go lower because Apple has basically bought the entire 5nm production. So they're just stuck until TSMC can build out more production capacity.
Yeah, and then that's another question about TSMC's Taiwanese manufacturer, right? So why is Taiwan, like TSMC, is the leader in semiconductor manufacturing?
I think early on they kind of opened themselves up, and they collaborated with a lot of different companies. So in that way, they were able to pull in the expertise of many different companies, because everyone wants to build a slightly different thing, and so they're able to solve a lot more problems together than someone like Intel, where they only manufacture Intel products.
Yeah, I guess mentioning Intel, and I guess Intel have been overtaken by almost like AMD. I'm not sure it's overtaken by AMD right now, but it's not, their stock price have been going down, right? So, it's all coming around to stock price. So what happened to Intel? Like, why is it losing its market share?
Intel has really been stagnant for the last 5 or 6 years. Their upper management has kind of been slowly taken over by MBAs.
MBA?
Yeah, like they used to be like very engineering heavy company. Executives used to be very engineering background, but now they're kind of slowly, as they leave, they're replaced with MBAs. I've heard basically, like, they didn't want to build out or upgrade their facility. They wanted to be able to reuse their fab for like one extra generation. And they ran into more than expected number of problems, and they just haven't been able to resolve them and get the yield up because of it, because they didn't want to build a new fab. So part of it is, they just want to save money to, not buy additional equipment and building fabs. Part of it is that they really didn't have any competition, so they didn't have to push themselves. last 5 or so years, they've been like every year they come out with a new generation of Intel chips, and every year it's like 2, 5, 7% better. Whereas AMD has been going like I don't know what the percentage is, but they've been accelerating quite a bit, and then Apple has been accelerating quite a bit. So it's not so much that like Intel failed horribly. It's more like they just haven't been trying as hard. So they really haven't done a whole lot in the last 5 years. And basically just this past year, AMD has surpassed them. Right.
In terms of market share, I guess.
In terms of performance and cost.
What do you mean performance? Like the new chips they make?
Yeah, like single-threaded performance, multi-threaded performance, the amount of power that they consume, the energy efficiency.
What's the difference between, I guess, AMD and Intel right now? The CPUs, the performance. Now, I guess one. I guess the speed, right? Do they have anything different in speed?
Yeah, like their speed is different. I don't know in terms of like gigahertz wise, but if you look at stuff like rendering or different benchmarks, AMD is coming out ahead.
AMD has also been focused on a lot on GPUs, right?
Yes, yeah, they just released a new generation of GPUs, and NVIDIA released a new generation of GPUs. So this past, like basically end of last year, you had new consoles, new GPUs, new CPUs. They're all manufactured, or most of them manufactured on 7nm TSMC. And you have the pandemic where everyone is just buying more stuff because they can't travel.
Why? So Intel is not working on GPU anymore, or do they?
Intel's working on a GPU. They're slowly coming out with something, but they're primarily focused on supercomputer side for now, and eventually they'll get to consumers.
Intel does a lot of integrated GPUs, but do they have any discrete ones?
Yeah, they announced them. I don't know if anyone can buy them yet, but they have the supercomputer contract that they like have to finish in a couple of years. So they're prioritizing that first.
What do you mean by integrated?
So it's basically integrated into the CPU chip. So it's a much lower power, like it takes less power. It's a lot less powerful, but it gives you some basic graphics computing kind of in an easy format. So it's good for like small laptops and things. Discrete are like graphics cards or chips that are discrete, separate from the CPU. And those are generally a lot more powerful. That's what you want to play your games or mine your Bitcoins and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so Intel makes integrated GPUs, but they don't have to be low power. So if you look at the new consoles, they all have integrated GPUs, and that AMD makes, and they can just put a big GPU in there in the same die as a CPU, and then it's more powerful.
So okay, now you mentioned NVIDIA. So it's NVIDIA and AMD. How are they compared to each other in terms of?
They seem to be pretty neck and neck. NVIDIA has been in the lead for many years now. The software is more stable. They're generally more performant and better. They have better energy efficiencies. This time around, they're not so good, partly because they're running on the Samsung process as opposed to the TSMC process. It's a little bit more inefficient, and maybe they got a little bit ahead of themselves. They're focused much more on the cool things like AI workloads and ray tracing workloads. They excel in those quantities, but they kind of suffer at just like raw graphics performance.
Okay. So going back to one question about Intel, so you were saying that they were they are not investing in their fabrication, basically making their own chips, right? So should they go? I think a lot of people were like advising them to go fabless, basically like get rid of their fabs, right? Just like work on design, I guess, design their chips, and then let other people do the manufacturing, like TSMC.
So I don't know what the relative production capacities are, but from what I've heard, like Intel is still selling a lot more chips than AMD. And TSMC likely cannot accommodate the quantities that Intel would need. And a lot of Intel's advantages is that they own the manufacturing and the design. And so there's a lot of vertical integration going on there, and that's where they win out a lot of times. So I think they're spending more resources on their manufacturing, and like they might be in decline now, but they have such a massive lead over AMD in terms of just like customer relationships and like the software side as well. And there's a lot of software that supports and optimized for Intel, but not AMD. So even though if like any generic game or benchmark runs better on AMD for like an enterprise customer, their servers are going to still be running better on Intel, and they don't have to take the chance of migrating everything over to AMD.
I see. So yeah, so
long story short, basically Intel has like at least a decade of runway. They can do nothing for a decade and before they have to really worry.
Okay, so sounds nice. Sounds like it's a good time. Maybe put $10 into Intel for me, and it's.
Well, that doesn't mean
Intel is slowly going down.
Yeah, I was gonna say
you don't want to invest in them now. They might come up, but.
Got you. All right. That's good. So
it's just a very slow going down. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So as we know, I think we like neural networks, AI, machine learning. These data centers are using GPUs, right? Right now, and Bitcoin mining, right? So is in the future going to be GPU dominated, or do you think like still going to be CPU dominated? Or maybe that's a bad question, right?
It really depends on what the workload is. If you're doing more AI based, you're probably better off with something like the Google TPU, where it's a special piece of silicon that's designed to just do AI stuff.
Google what?
TPU, their tensor processing unit.
Oh, wow. All right. Interesting. So basically Google is making specific chips for doing machine learning stuff, AI stuff.
Pretty much neural network focused.
Okay. Do they have a lot of customers for that?
I'm sure they do, but they don't sell the TPUs to other people. It's just for Google servers. So they sell the service. They don't sell the hardware.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, cool. Going back to GPU. So I guess I'm curious about it. What's the origin story of GPU? Do you know?
Well, so like I said before, it started with video accelerators. Basically, they accelerate like small parts of the graphics pipeline. And as as these chips became more sophisticated and they take over more and more of the graphics pipeline, NVIDIA at a certain point decided, hey, we can call this its own processor. So they dubbed it the graphics processing unit. So that's where GPU came from.
When was that?
Around 2000. I remember my first graphics card was a GPU.
2000
was the first GPU actually. So.
Oh wow!
That's later than I thought. I feel like it was only a few years later that I got like my first computer, which I knew had a GPU in it, and I guess I assumed that would have been how they were for a long time. But
I mean, it was called video card, right?
Yeah.
GPU, the term didn't come about until like 2000, 2001, something like that.
So you're telling me you had your hands on a GPU in 2000 already? Wow, that was like what, You're 15?
Something like that. Yeah.
15?
Yeah, I saved my lunch money for like 2 years, and then mom was like, "You're not getting anywhere close. I'll just buy it for you."
Hold on, what sweet game did you play with that GPU?
Oh man, I played Total Annihilation. Have you heard of that one?
Nah. So like sounds like something like Doom.
It's more like Red Alert or StarCraft.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But it actually was, I think it was 3D, but it was like minimally so. There was a game called Homeworld, which is like a space RTS that was fully 3D, and it was extremely blocky, right? But at the time, I just felt like I was watching a movie.
Wow. Wow. What's your first computer? When was it?
Yeah, I think it was around then, 2000-ish.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I didn't really, have a computer until like college. So I guess that's why I'm slower than you guys. So
Was this the time when you were in the village shoe?
yeah, no electricity. Yeah.
Wait, you came to Florida for high school, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But didn't really, extensively using a computer, right? So yeah.
Wow. What did you do when in high school if you didn't have a computer?
I mean, you don't need a computer in high school, right? At least in my high school, I don't need a computer.
Sure, yeah. But what did you do for fun then?
I mean, I help out in the restaurant. I go to a restaurant and study in the back.
So studious.
Reading books, right? I was studying I was still trying to learn English. So that was so that's what I did. So
I feel like even then most teachers would have rather things be printed out, like reports, compared to handwritten. Did you just like annoy your teachers?
no,
Or were they still wanting handwritten papers?
yeah, everything's handwritten. I was taking like AP European history. I was like taking notes. Yeah, everything's handwritten.
Oh my gosh, that'd be terrible. Imagine writing a report. Oh my God.
Well, what did you do in like middle school? Like this would have been our like late elementary, like early middle school years, right?
My middle school or C's middle school?
Well, no. I'm saying the math. Like, if I think by high school, most of the stuff, yes, was word processed. But like I'm saying, I think in elementary and middle school, I think I handwrote a lot. Like, not exclusively, but
I don't think I ever wrote anything that was more than 2 pages, maybe more than one. Like even in middle school, junior high, if we had a report, I would type it up and print it.
yeah,
And I feel like most kids did. And
I guess that's true.
And I was in Louisiana, so it's not exactly, leading the pack in terms of education for the country. So I assumed it would have been similar everywhere else, but
You keep saying that, but every time you say stuff, the things that you learn, like it's something that me and I had never learned. So it's like your high school is like way ahead of at least my high school.
yeah, but you went to high school in Florida, right? So so we're talking about states that are, all at the end of the pack here.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. All right. So going back to the computer chips. So you mentioned earlier, like Moore's law, like basically predicts that computer chips basically the speed of computer basically doubles every 2 years, right? So is just still valid? No.
I mean, it's not a law, right? It's more like a self-fulfilled prophecy kind of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The law was made, and then everyone's like, okay, this is the cadence that we need to be following. And so for a long time, they just kind of shrank the process every 2 years, and it was fine. But in the last many years, I think there's just been a lot of issues. The price of like they need to go into ultra UEV. I forgot what it stands for, but some kind of advanced lithography that costs billions of dollars to make these machines. I've been to a few lectures where they talk about this, and the consensus seems to be that there's no like roadmap for progressively shrinking down. It's more like there are a lot of one-trick things that they will give a one-time bump in increasing the or reducing the size of the transistor and increasing the speed. But there's many of these one-time bumps. So as long as people can keep up with the cadence, we can keep shrinking down and making these computer chips more efficient.
I see. So what's the limit? Is it 7 nanometer or 5 nanometer? And it's the transistor, the channel between the switches, right? Anyway, yeah.
So these numbers don't really mean a whole lot anymore.
Oh, really?
They're more like marketing numbers. For example, the density of like a 5 nanometer chip is not twice that of a 10 nanometer chip.
Okay.
A lot of times, like Intel has been saying, oh, we'll make a 14 nanometer, and then we'll make a 14 nanometer plus, and then 14 nanometer plus plus, and then plus plus plus, right? But other companies like TSMC, they've been going like, oh, we'll make a 10 nanometer, then an 8 nanometer, then a 7 nanometer, then a 5 nanometer. So the nanometers don't actually necessarily correspond to the actual physical dimension of the transistor anymore.
Okay. So what should we pay attention to then? What's the, I guess, what's determined to keep Moore's law going? Like what's the, I guess actually the better question is that what's the, talking about nanometer, like what's the right, what is the wall like, we are hitting, right? What's the wall that we are hitting?
Well, yeah, you can't get much lower than like 1 nanometer, I don't think.
Because you'd be literally like 10 atoms across or something.
Yeah, I think we're already at like a few atoms across now. But that is just one dimension, right? And a transistor is 3 dimensions. So you could potentially shrink other dimensions. There are the space between transistors that you can shrink. There is the voltage that you can shrink. So there are things that people can do. They can do different doping, different materials with different characteristics. So, but a lot of those alternatives are just too costly. So basically, by the time every new generation of manufacturing, they're increasing the cost. TSMC is investing something like $25 to $28 billion this year in building out their fabs. So eventually it's going to be 30 billion, 40 billion, 50 billion. However much it's going to be, eventually it will be to the point where those alternative manufacturing processes will be cost competitive, and then we'll switch to something else.
So what's the future then in there?
Well, I don't know. I don't keep up with these things.
Moore's law?
but suffice to say, there's probably enough alternatives going on that we can keep extending Moore's law for indefinite number of years.
What are the methods? Like,
that's my expertise.
Okay.
All right, hold on. I'm just gonna say, I mean, hasn't Moore's law already stopped? Like, yeah, things are still improving for sure, but like computer chips are not twice as fast as they were 2 years ago, or even close, right?
So Moore's law is actually the number of transistors per area, per square millimeter, or something like that.
Okay.
Has
so that still
they're really
kept
focused
up?
on just like packing them even tighter, tighter, and tighter.
I know when it comes to packing things that dense, like a big issue is heat, and just like actually getting the heat out. Right. I guess from just like a more consumer perspective, less expert, like it seems like, oh, you want a faster computer chip. Well, now we have 2 cores, 4 cores, 8 cores. That's the way they've increased your actual, like the speed you have in the last decade, really. It's not that the chips themselves are like, they get a little better, but individual chips haven't seemed to really increase dramatically, even anywhere close to Moore's law in terms of performance. But
yeah, so like per core, like single core, single threaded workloads. If you look at Intel, I think the last 5 years, they've gone up by like 50% or something like that. So it's not much on a year-to-year cadence. And you're right, like they've just been doubling their cores whenever they kind of see the competition do it. The way that we're getting around this is that, a lot of the new technologies, new applications, they're not enabled by faster cores, faster CPUs. They're enabled by better GPUs with AI chips, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the trend, is that instead of just kind of brute force making a CPU faster and faster, we'll develop silicon, they'll develop different architectures that fit the workload better. So we don't have to have one general purpose core to do these things very fast. We can just make 1,000 really dumb cores, and then they're all structured in such a way that they can just do things maybe at a slower speed, but because there's so many of them, you can do a lot more in aggregate.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you're talking about almost like application driven. So like AI chips, right? Like the tensor processing unit, similar to that.
Yeah.
And then you can make one that maybe in the future, someone gonna make one that is like specific for mining Bitcoins.
Oh, they already do.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Cool.
like you can't mine a Bitcoin with a GPU or CPU anymore. It's not cost efficient. And you don't have the necessary speed. So people are using application specific silicon or ASIC.
Are these FPGAs or do they have a company?
No,
like
not
building?
FPGAs, right? FPGAs are they're programmable. People have built specific pieces of silicon just for mining, that they don't do anything else but mine.
I
So
never heard of that.
they're able to get like much better energy efficiency because of that, like 10, 100,000 times better energy efficiency than what you can do with a CPU or GPU.
What's the cost of making a chip like that?
Millions of dollars. But when you can make millions of dollars with Bitcoins, then it works out.
Okay. Yeah. So but millions of dollars, they're probably making multiple, right? Now how many do they get? Do you know?
I like the cost of design and prototyping a chip is in the millions of dollars. And then when you start manufacturing them, then they're the same as any other chip.
Do you know which company is doing that?
I don't know the specific names.
You know who is doing that?
Shu just needs their stock ticker. He doesn't need anything else. So is like the technology to custom make these chips and like the whole, like, are we getting better at designing and testing new custom fab? Like, is there going to be a future where, it's not, say, 3D printing easy, but you can be like, oh, I need hardware to do this very narrow task, and it doesn't take a tens of millions of dollars investment, but I can just have a company make it fairly quick. Is that something that's coming, or is that just still
there are definitely startups on that trend. They're trying to make it so that you can design your own CPU core to say the number of cores, how wide they are, how much cache you want, all of this stuff. It's all parameterized. You just say that, and then you click a button, and then they can stamp it out for you.
But that's still a CPU at heart, right? Like, it's not going to necessarily do. It's that's just kind of tuning the relative parameters of a CPU, but not like make a different design, different architecture.
If you're asking for like, can someone just code out an algorithm and then like print that out as a CPU or as an ASIC, I think we have a long ways to go to get there.
Yeah. Okay.
Now
So
that would be cool. I'm going to switch my dissertation.
Yeah. I mean, algorithms running like AI algorithm running on like generic like CPU is much slower, right? If you just do it in hardware, right, it will be much faster. So
yeah, but the thing is, you still need millions of dollars to make these things. So and it's not so much that it's hard to make them; it's that it's very labor intensive to verify that they work and that they don't break. Right? The more complicated your chip, the more verification you need. Usually in a chip design company, like half the people or more all they do is verify.
what other? So that's the main cost. I guess I'm trying to understand that what can you get the cost down such that everybody will be easy to make a application specific chip in the future.
Yeah, like every step of the process has to be automated. Right now, a lot of it is pretty labor intensive, and people in the chip design domain, they're always optimizing it and automating, but a lot of times you have to throw all that away with the next generation.
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, you are saying that maybe we don't need to keep Moore's law going, right? We maybe in the future is moving toward more nice application specific, right? Is that the main point?
Right, and the thing is, you have an application specific chip, but it only makes sense if you're gonna like really, if your application really depends on it, right? If you're gonna be using it a lot, you can't be like, oh, I want to make a Facebook chip, and then Facebook dies, and then your chip is useless.
Right. Well, I was going to say, Shu, you keep talking about like how the hardware changes, but the software has a say too, right? Like programmers can implement applications or like design models to fit the hardware as well, like design applications to fit the parallelism of a system or something like that.
Yeah.
So, like you can program something like to be very serially done, or you can program it to be like multi-threaded or, and exploit the hardware you have.
Yeah, true. But I guess if you don't doing, I guess okay, that makes sense. But I guess I'm just mostly focused on the hardware technology where it can go, right? So, and yeah, okay. I guess that, yeah, okay. So, I mean, software can help as well. So anyway.
There's always going to be like a software hardware co-design where you're designing your hardware for the software, right? And then once that's locked down, you can't really change the software anymore, unless you design a new chip or you design something more programmable. So like for these kind of AI chips, have you heard of, I think it's Cypress or something?
Cypress?
They're making like an entire wafer is just one chip, right? And it's like 10 kilowatts or something. I forgot. It's crazy. They pump a lot of energy through this thing. And, it's all like, it's like a giant matrix of really tiny chips. And so you can just program it so that this program runs on this part of the chip, and then another program runs on this part of the chip. And then you physically there's a compiler that does it, but it will like route your algorithm through these chips so that they make maximum use of the chip, and they can get a much higher performance and energy efficiency out of it. But there is tremendous amount of overhead in terms of you want to fit your application to a T to this partition of the chip. So there's a lot of ways to go, and you can make there's a spectrum of fully programmable to fully one application, and there's a lot of different things that you can design in between.
Okay, so talking about programmable chips, so is that gonna be a big thing, I guess, because FPGA have been around for a long time, right? I feel like not a lot of people are using it, right?
Well, FPGAs they're more for prototyping generally.
Yeah. Okay.
But there are more AI and startup companies that are building their own chips, and so in that way, there's a lot of people who are designing their own application specific chips. But that's really because deep learning has become so prolific. It's used everywhere now, and there is a market and an expectation that it will keep going. So if you want to run some AI algorithm on every video uploaded by YouTube, on every picture and video that every phone takes, that's a lot of extra compute, right? And so you want optimize that. So there is a market for developing chips specifically for that.
Okay.
But it's not going to be just like, you want some toy idea and you design a chip for that. There's going to need to be like a lot of momentum in the market space before someone will like want to invest the capital.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Leave more slow. What about quantum computing?
I think it's a toy at this point.
Toy.
Yeah, like technically there are some applications that some quantum computers can do, much better than classical regular computers. There are instances where like it would take like thousands of years for like all the computers on Earth to solve this problem that this one quantum computer could do. But at this point in time, none of those problems are practical. Like no one needs to do them. But I think at the point where like quantum computers can start cracking encryption, I think that's going to be pretty major milestone.
Like the encryption for the blockchain?
Encryption for anything, right? Like our internet is run on encryption. So if anyone can break that encryption, that's going to like seriously wreck the internet.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, so I know right now currently like CPUs are bits, right? Like 0, 1, right? Represent 0, 1. And then quantum computer, you can do qubits, right? Quantum bits.
Right.
How does that, I guess, why is that more better than bits just 1 and 0?
So like I only know about this from like at a superficial level.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you can compute like all possible states. Right. So if you have like a 32-bit number, in binary, that's only ever going to represent one number. Right. But in quantum bits, you could represent all possible numbers that could be represented by 32 bits. Right. So that's like 4 billion numbers that a quantum computer can represent. And so it can solve a particular problem with these bits kind of like very fast because it's a physical system of solving. It's like, imagine if you have, imagine like a computer is trying to render a 3D scene, right? Okay. And it's trace each ray and bouncing each material and calculating all these things. And then many hours later, it comes back with a matrix of colors that represents a view of this 3D scene. Or you can build this 3D scene, right? In reality, just build it with actual, like the surface you want, just paint it that way. And then the lights you want, just buy the light for it. And then boom, you turn on the light, it's instant. You have the scene, right? So that's kind of like what quantum computers are, is that you set up the actual problem represented by the qubits and the way they are connected to each other. You actually build out the problem in hardware, and then you let it run, and then it brings you the solution. So that's the current state of quantum computers, is that you're kind of building a machine for the problem you want to solve.
I mean,
that's a good analogy.
So you mentioned that it's still a toy, but people have been working on it for like the last 20 or 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So what's going on? I mean, what's like keeping it like getting better?
I think part of it is just like it's very hard. So like you have to cool the computers down to like almost absolute zero. It's very finicky. It's easy. It's still very fragile. And so like it's not like every time you turn it on it's gonna work. Like sometimes it might not work, and there's a number of reasons why it might not work. And so it's more like engineering wise, we're not at that point where it's reliable enough and cost effective enough where you can just hand these out.
Okay.
Is it going to happen at all, though? I mean, like, have they actually proven that, like, because I know one of the major problems with it is like something to do with error correction, right? Like when a bit flips, you can detect that and correct that. Whereas I think it's been proven you can detect if there's some type of issue with the qubit, but like they haven't found a way to correct it yet or something. So like, I mean, have they shown at least theoretically it's going to happen?
I think you know more about that than me at this point, because I know like there's some like probabilistic solution that they generate, but I don't know too much about like error correction in quantum computers.
I see. Yeah. Well, no, I was reading a book for it this week and I got through like a chapter. So I can't say I know more than you, but I know like basically quantum computing, like you don't represent probabilities, you represent probabilities in the complex number space. That was what the first chapter was.
What does that mean?
Well, that means that means essentially they essentially were saying that quantum computers, like where probabilities will always be positive and always sum up to one, like in the complex number space, like you can have bits that essentially are qubits that essentially cancel each other out, which is part of the reason why this like can make a lot of computations like a lot faster than they would be otherwise. Yeah, I'll have to finish the book, but it's interesting, but I get the impression, yes, that a lot of this is very, very theoretical and not even close to happening.
So I'm sure I know less than either of y'all do, but my limited understanding was like, even if you got all the theoretical and implementation details to work, it's still like, it's only useful still for a very narrow set of problems. Like you're never gonna render the next generation PS8 is never gonna have a quantum computer to render graphics faster, right? Like that's just not what it does, is what I understood, but that could definitely be wrong.
Well, I mean, isn't it just a different way? Well, yeah, I mean, you could definitely be right. I mean, but I'm just thinking, like, isn't it essentially just a different way of encoding information? So, like, I mean, like we encode information with zeros and ones. Like, could we figure out a way with encode information with these qubits, right?
I think the issue is that we don't have something like add and subtract and like multiply and shift and these kind of operations with qubits. And I don't think it's a matter of like running a long program in a quantum computer because I don't think there's like serial set of instructions that we command the quantum computer to do. It's more like we set up a physical structure and then we let it run. So at this point in time, the kind of physical structures they can set up only like maps well to like these random non-practical problems that no one really cares about.
Right.
So if you could build like, say like the example I've given, like if you can build a representation of a room like a 3D space in a quantum computer, then yeah, maybe it could like render to it, but I don't think we're anywhere near that right now.
All right. Not to invest in quantum computing. That's it.
I think that's a smart call.
Yeah.
Not yet, at least.
Yeah. So my last question from me, what are the innovations in the microchip space that you are most excited about? If there's anything.
I mean, I think AI is definitely the most exciting thing right now. But I also think that just the way that computers are structured right now, there is a lot of fat left on the table that we can cut.
Oh, what?
A lot of fat. So what I mean by that is like, even though we're like squeezing the transistors and we're making them more efficient and we're designing hardware to better process these things, to better map to the kind of applications we're running them through. At the heart of it, all all of computer architecture is still based on the von Neumann model, which is you have a bank of memory, you have a processor, and then there's a bus that connects them to it so that you can transfer data, manipulate data, and then store it back. At this point in time, it is this interface that is consuming like a lot of energy. So it's like 10 to 100 times more energy to transfer a bit from memory to the processor than it is to like do a floating point operation on that bit or on a set of bits.
So you're talking about between the processor and the CPU cache?
No, not the cache. I mean, like at each level of the cache, there's more and more energy required to move a bit. And then to the point where you're moving from the memory to the last level cache, that is like the highest cost in energy. And of course, like moving it to like an SSD would be even more costly, right? And so that's why we have caches, is so that we don't have to move data as much. But when you think about something like, you're playing the latest AAA game, every frame that's being rendered requires gigabytes of data to move from the memory to the GPU and back, right? And so you're transferring oftentimes the same set of gigabytes of data back and forth over and over again for every single frame. And that is where most of the energy is being consumed. So if you can find a way to not move that data at all, then you can be saving a lot of energy. So we could be looking at 10, 100 times more energy efficiency in computers over the next several decades.
So, I mean, I guess the obvious thing that points to is trying to make a massive cache that's, 8 gigabytes big on the chip. Is that possible?
So that even then, right, you're still moving data around. Maybe it's maybe like 2 or 3 or 4 times more energy efficient, but cache themselves consume quite a bit of energy. So that's not the solution. There are this model called processor in memory, where you put processor logic onto the memory dies. So you have like a bank of memory, and instead of loading that onto a bus and then transfer to a CPU, you put simple like what do you call it? Like ALUs, so like things that can do like add and subtract and shifts and stuff into each memory bank, and then you can have like thousands of them in each one. And so you load the data onto this thing, process it, and then maybe 1 out of every 100 bits then needs to be transferred to the actual processor to do work. Right. So in that way, you can increase energy efficiency.
So you just arrange things such that minimize the transfer of things, right?
Right.
So the main thing, the main heat, I guess, the energy is coming from because it's transferring electricity, right?
It's the traces, right?
Yeah, basically you're transferring, like moving electricities around, right?
Right. There's a lot more electricity required to move a bit of data, off the chip into the motherboard, and then on the trace on the motherboard, and then back into another chip.
Yeah. So is that why people are moving, like try to work on like something called optical computing? Like instead of using electricity, use light to transfer data?
Yeah, I think those are, we already have that. It's called fiber.
Oh, what?
It's called fiber optics.
Right.
So like you might have fiber internet. That's
but I'm saying that you're working on a chip level, right? Like computer chips, like optical computer.
Right. So there's actually not that much energy required to deliver data like across a distance within a computer. It's more of getting the signal off of the chip and then back onto the chip. That's where most of the energy cost occurs. So if you're doing fiber, you still have to do on and off the chip. And there's actually quite a bit of energy consumed in transforming a digital signal to an optical signal. So over long distances, that makes sense, but within a chip, it doesn't make as much sense.
Okay.
And optical mechanisms, they're larger.
Yeah.
They consume area as well.
Okay. I think going back to what you mentioned earlier about exciting about AI and also AI. So AI chips, I guess, why are you excited about that?
Well, this is kind of a pet theory of mine, but I think AI can be more beneficial to like programmers earlier than your general layman, right? Like it's hard for Siri or Google to understand like natural language because there's a lot of ambiguity. We map like our language onto the real world, and so the way our language is interpreted is filtered through an understanding of reality, right? If we want AI to understand our language, it has to understand the reality we live in and that we talk about. But if you look at a programmer's perspective, it's a restricted, smaller language set that we refer to a finite number of, small number of things. And so you can look at like for loops and tree algorithms and recursions and all that. That is a much smaller set than things in the known universe or
natural language,
things that your average teenager might want to talk about, right? So I think we'll probably see AI impacting programming earlier than AI like writing your term paper. I don't know. Maybe term papers could also be something that AIs can help with, because like a lot of times it's the same thing that everyone writes. But of course that would defeat the point of having people write term papers.
And how is that related to the computing though, the microchip level, or does it?
It doesn't unless except that computer chips are what AI algorithms would run on.
Okay. Yeah.
So like better AI chips can allow more powerful, bigger AI algorithms with larger footprint to run on, and run at efficiently and at the speed that you would require it to.
Hold on. I got to bring up though another, I think a big potential use of these chips, kind of AI chips that Google's developing is in robotics. I mean, we could be biased, but some of the things like a lot of there's a decent amount of stuff that works in terms of like computer vision and SLAM and motion planning that are kind of core to make robots that can like interact and deal with the real world, but they are expensive and there's still some like polishing to do to make them, commercially viable. But I don't think I don't think that the technology and the fundamental algorithms need much more work. I think with good engineering and good hardware to run it, like we could make robots that do a lot of tasks right now that we don't really are kind of out of range, but not that far. Like if you can we've all seen deep neural networks like identify like items, right? So like that could be one pipeline in a larger robotic system that, is picking and placing objects like at an Amazon warehouse. They need something to identify objects really fast and efficiently, right? So they have a TPU to do that. That's, a TPU and some custom software optimized for the Amazon warehouse. And then, maybe there's also a chip for this for motion planning, which is in some ways is a problem where you're testing a bunch of solutions. It depends how you do it, but sometimes it's a matter of trying a bunch of solutions and, finding a good one. So you combine two chips to do that, along with a CPU to kind of just be the general management. Maybe you have a robot arm that can do pick and place on a human level, right? And stuff like that is extremely.
Are there arms that are that delicate and flexible to pick any arbitrary object, like including soft body objects?
Hardware, you can definitely make something hardware that could do that in terms, especially because like grippers, you can add like cushion and stuff, right? That gives them some freedom. But like the software to, I don't know, make it smart enough. Maybe.
So yeah, we do have arms now that can do that grab very like soft stuff, like egg, but yeah. And how do we use that? And like how to do the correct, move anywhere we want, make it more intelligent is still a challenge.
I mean, I feel like most of the stuff you get shipped on Amazon is either not fragile, or if it is fragile, it's in its own, like it's in its own inner packaging to start with, right? Because these things get tossed around and abused anyway. So I don't think a robot has to be incredibly delicate, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
All
But
right.
yeah, that's my thoughts. That's where I go to when I hear AI chips. I'm like, this is gonna be how we get to robots like expanding into a lot of other areas.
Yeah.
So those are the main limitations of like general robotics, is the path planning and identifying objects.
Those are some of the major challenges. Motion planning in general, both to like move yourself through space and like move an arm is one of them, and vision. Those are probably two of the hardest things that have gone a lot better, but like restrict a robot, because it's relatively much easier to do like the AI problem of like what's the optimal way to like load a dishwasher, right? Like if you kind of have that mapped out to the logic, the hard part for a robot is like just like grabbing the dish that's just randomly thrown in a sink, and then like they have to see it, figure out exactly where it is in 3D space, and then find the right way to like grab it. And if there's any other objects nearby, like does that fall off when you pick it up, stuff like that. So that's like the hard part for robotics. Yeah.
Well, I thought the hardest part is folding a shirt.
Folding a shirt is incredibly difficult. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I would say last question. Last question. if you're gonna teach someone like don't know, like someone who doesn't know anything about computer chips, like how would you teach the person? How would you recommend? Where should they start? How would you teach that?
There are actually, I found quite a few good YouTube videos where they'll go through like the logic gates, from logic gates to like Tetris. Right? It'll teach you everything in between. And for me, it was just like the first few weeks of my first intro to computing course that like really opened my eyes and taught me like how computers work at the basic level. If you can go from like electricity's flowing through and like switches to logical operations to Boolean operations, and then construct a truth table, and then you can map that to arithmetic, and then you can map that to how do numbers represent things like text or pixels or sound waves. Then at that point you can do pretty much everything, and you can understand how it could logically extrapolate to everything else that we use computers for.
I think computers are a really interesting example of something where each step is actually not that complicated. Like once you learn it, it's pretty simple, but there are just so many steps, so many layers of abstraction that like if you want to fully know it, you have to go through quite a long stack sort of like knowledge basically. But it's not hard. It's just taking it one step at a time. That's my opinion about it.
It's not like advanced mathematics, which I am very bad at. Right. In my day job, all I have to do is count for the most part. Counting from 0 and counting from 1, like those are the two hardest things I have to do.
All right.
In computer science, there are just variations of this joke, but there's like I think it's like there's only 3 real problems. 1 is naming things correctly, and 2 is off by 1 errors.
A what? Last second
off
one?
by 1 errors.
Off by 1 errors. All right.
Yeah.
I did not get a joke as usual.
There are 3 problems.
3 things, right?
Okay. Wow, I'm so bad at this. Wow, no sense of humor. All right. Anyway, that's all my questions. Anything from Mac and Mike?
No, I mean, I feel like you covered a pretty wide array of topics there, Shu.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Cool. All right. Thank you, C, for answering questions, no stupid questions, I would say.
No, they were very good questions.
All right.
I learned a lot about hardware. It's a good reminder from my intro to computing class like 8 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, computing is a very big area right now. There's a, computer interface, right? But this is this one I want to focus on the most fun, the chip level, right? The low level. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Should we unlight ourselves?
Yeah. Next week gaming. So tune
Gaming.
in.
We're doing gaming.
That's what I thought.
All right.
Oh, is your brother going to come on, Mike?
I don't know. I'll ask him.
What kind of game?
All right. We're going non-live.
All right.